But then the flight of from Wuhan. Now, one landed in Melbourne, one landed in Sydney, cargo flights of stuff. I'll just say what everyone's thinking. Why is it that we're allowing these people, almost acting like a successful invading army arriving in Australia?
Correct.
This is where the virus came from. And the first sort of opportunity, like 2 seconds after Wuhan is apparently declared corona-free, who believes that? We get a cargo flight of gear in, probably bringing back the gear that's been skulked off in shipments from Coles and Woolies shelves back in January, February. I mean, Evan, I think this is a wrong signal, a wrong step that somebody's got to account for.
So do I.
Yeah, I agree with you in many respects there, Gary, and to have the airline crew from those planes walking around the streets of Sydney afterwards is not a good look. From what I understand, there's many people that were on that flight that couldn't get out when the original flights went to Christmas Island or to Darwin, so they were.
I thought it was cargo. I thought it was cargo
lockdown. Yeah, but there's several more coming through now that Wuhan is supposedly opening back up again. But you've got rules for the airline crew of that plane, and then you've got rules for everyone else, and the rules for everyone else are 2 weeks lockdown, isolation in a hotel room close to the airport. That doesn't seem to have happened in this case.
Well, what we have to realise...
This is what really does irk people, Bronwyn. People get angry about this stuff. You can't have one rule for you and me and everybody else. I mean, and people in public life should know better. As you know, in public life, you tend to be held to a higher standard.
Sure do.
These guys on this airliner shouldn't have been allowed here.
Well, Gary, I think what we have to realise that we are actually fighting plenty of war analogies on two fronts. We've got the soft power one that says the Chinese have let that virus out, brought the free world to its knees. Now it's going out saying, oh, we're a superior system of government. We've cleaned up the problem in China. Now we're going out to help the rest of the world, having done the damage in the first place. So now we're not only fighting the disease that came from Wuhan, courtesy of the Communist Party of China, but we are now having to fight a propaganda war as well. And that flight from Wuhan is part of that propaganda war. The Belt and Road Initiative has to be seen for what it is. It's part of a soft sell war technique. I read an article recently that in an old naval magazine, I still belong to the Naval League, and it made the comparison between the strategy that Japan had, Imperial Japan had, to conquer the Pacific and extend its power, and making the analogy with the way that China is behaving with the Belt and Road Initiative. And I think there's a very real comparison. They make out a very serious argument. And we have to realise it. And our government has to be made to realise it. And we have to take really strong, tough action. No going back to the way it was, a whole new way forward. And if there's anybody in the way, we want to know who they are, and they have to be named and shamed and gone.
Well, I think it is kind of to that point. I mean, Carolee, it's not just simply the Chinese government-owned airline that brought supplies to Australia, and maybe some people, but I certainly know it was supplies into Sydney and into Melbourne. And it's not just that Chinese government-owned airline that brought that in. Whatever those supplies are, I don't know. Critical medical supplies, we're told, very similar to the sort of things I think that were skulked off the shelves of Coles and Woolies in January and February when we were concerned about what was happening in Wuhan. But it's also into America. I mean, I saw that the New England Patriots, who fly 767 around America when the American football season's on, Carolee, you know, they flew a flight over to China to pick up a whole bunch of medical equipment as well. So maybe some of the stuff on the Coles and Woolworths in downtown Perth have ended up over in New York now, because the Chinese have been the sorting house of the stuff they've been skulking in from other parts of the world. I mean, that is an accusation, but I don't see any reason, Carolee, why I couldn't believe that's true.
Well, I think also the amazing thing was that when the airline crew arrived from Wuhan and went into the Sydney hotel, they were absolutely amazed that it wasn't business as usual here, because you can just see that what's been drummed into them in China is just carry on as if nothing has actually happened. And the difficulty is that you can bet your bottom dollar if that was a flight from anywhere else, from America or whatever, there would be a police escort or whatever. It would not have been racist for the police to have actually accompanied the people in there to make sure that they're going into self-quarantine. I mean, we saw what happened with the Ruby Princess in New South Wales. We've seen what has happened in Western Australia. There are the passengers, 200 local passengers that went to Rottnest Island from quarantine from one of the cruise ships, Vasco da Gama. They're now free to go on. People have got to also make their way back from hotels in Western Australia to Adelaide and also back to Queensland. We've had terrible problems with the ships that are here. We've got one, the Artania, that is just refusing to leave Fremantle, and we've got people in ICU that were COVID-19 positive. But I just think the thing is that we have to acknowledge, yes, we can't not expect China to invest in our country and to take the iron ore and the wheat. And I've said before on this show, everyone wants China to play by the same rules as every other country in the world. But we also can't be frightened of calling out what we see. And it would not have been racist if there was an escort for this airline crew to accompany them to the hotel. Because again, we're relying on the crew to self-isolate. Now, we do know that people in China, because of the way that their government is run, they do what they're told. And hopefully the airline crew will isolate for 2 weeks. But who knows? I mean, we've had cases here in Western Australia.
No, they won't. They won't. I think they've gone back.
No, they won't.
They've gone back. They've gone back already.
Well, that's right. And so why isn't this called out? Because people don't want to be.
Well, we're calling it out now. I mean,
they're calling it out now, but they're not calling it out before, because Australia has got to get over its cultural cringe and realise that when it's saying things, it does not mean that we are racist. You know, we're one of the most welcoming nations in the world. We've got an incredibly large, refugee per capita. There'll always be people that argue that we should take more. There are some countries in the world that take none. We're very welcoming, but the thing is, I think our priority is wrong, and I think that China, for the whole world, it needs to be held to account. I mean, as we say, we don't know what will be at the end of this road. We don't know if we're going to be locked down for 6 months or the next year. Anyone that gives a date is false. It's like the NRL. They're promoting when they're going to start on May 28. They're now saying it's a goal. No one actually knows. But how terrifying has it been to see people just lose their jobs, their businesses, their livelihoods overnight? I know that we've had a fantastic package.
Exactly right.